This video is brought to you by Privacy.com, a free service that allows you to use virtual credit cards when shopping online, helping you to keep track of your spending and to protect your personal information. Head over to Privacy.com/filmradar to learn more, and you'll also get a free $5 credit.
I would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
What makes a cult classic? There seems to be no exact definition that everyone agrees on, but the general consensus is that it is a creative work that transcends its original failings to become an iconic piece of fiction with a passionate fanbase. So something like Star Wars would hardly be considered to be a cult classic because despite having a widespread and loyal community of fans, the film was a smash success with both critics and audiences alike upon release. Whereas something like Fight Club failed miserably when first released, but after years of retrospective viewing is now widely considered to be a cinematic masterpiece. Films like Blade Runner or Evil Dead that weren't understood or appreciated in their own time, but through a loyal and passionate community of supporters who spread the film through word of mouth, continue to reach a wider audience with each passing year. And whether we're talking about a misunderstood masterpiece like 2001: A Space Odyssey, or the so bad it's good films like The Room, every cult classic offers something different than the regular theater fare of its day and stands the test of time precisely for that reason. But among the vast array of films now considered to be cult classics, none have had the same long-lasting impact or cultural significance as the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Originally a stage production called The Rocky Horror Show, it premiered at the Royal Court Theatre in London in 1973. Richard O'Brien was an unemployed actor who began working on the script as a way to keep himself occupied during a harsh winter. It was born out of his love for the iconic Hammer horror films and B-movie sci-fi classics like Tarantula and Forbidden Planet, mashed together with the bubblegum rock of the 1950s as well as the burgeoning glam rock scene of the 1970s. He brought his script to Australian director Jim Sharman, who had garnered acclaim for his work on Hair and Jesus Christ Superstar. The musical was an immediate and smash success, consistently filling out the capacity of the Royal Court Theatre before moving on to larger venues like the King's Road Theatre, where it eventually caught the eye of Lou Adler, a renowned record producer who had worked with Carole King and the Mamas and the Papas, who secured the American theatrical rights to the musical and brought it to the Roxy Theatre in Los Angeles, premiering in 1974 with an all-new cast with exception to Tim Curry, notably bringing in then mostly unknown musician Meatloaf for the roles of Eddie and Dr. Scott. Throughout its original run in LA and London, several notable names were in attendance, like David Bowie, Elvis Presley, and Princess Diana, to name a few.
And Princess Diana actually requested to meet me because she was such a Rocky Horror fan. And she said, "Oh yes, it quite completed my education."
After the unexpected success of the stage musical, O'Brien and Sharman began discussing the possibilities of a feature film adaptation. There was original talk of producing the film with a much larger budget and casting well-known names in the major roles, with people like Mick Jagger being eyed for Dr. Frankenfurter and Steve Martin for Brad Majors. But Sharman decided to sacrifice the larger budget to retain the show's original cast and crew. Additional scenes were added to expand the length of the film, a musical score was provided by Richard Hartley to fill the space between O'Brien's songs, Susan Sarandon and Barry Bostwick were brought on board at the behest of 20th Century Fox, who wanted American actors in the lead roles, and Pierre LaRoche, known for his work with Mick Jagger and David Bowie, was brought on board to redesign the makeup for the characters. Many of the sets and props were directly taken from the vaults of old Hammer Productions, with the primary filming location taking place at Oakley Court, a Victorian-era castle that was featured in Hammer films like The Brides of Frankenstein. Despite a troubled production due to the film's low budget and the poor conditions of the filming locations, production wrapped in 1974, with the finished film hitting theaters in the summer of 1975.
Well, that's a good show.
Yes, it is a good film, isn't it? Died a death when it first came out.
The film was pulled from theaters after just one weekend, and the studio canceled its premieres in other cities across America. Sometimes the magic of a stage show is lost in translation when brought to the screen, or maybe the general audiences of 1975 just weren't ready for something as off-kilter and transgressive. But regardless of the how or why, the film failed to find the same success as its stage counterpart, and it seemed that the studio was ready to cut their losses and shelve the film permanently.
I didn't really know what to do with it, or what on earth it was.
And that may have been the end of it, but Tim Deegan, who worked in the marketing division at Fox, saw the potential for success in the midnight circuit. John Waters' film Pink Flamingos had already established that there was a market for campy pastiche filmmaking, and Deegan thought that the Rocky Horror Picture Show might find a similar success. He convinced the studio to take a chance, and the film made its midnight debut at the Waverly Theater in New York City on April 1st, 1976. Shortly after its initial midnight screening, audience members began returning for repeat viewings, often yelling lines at the screen as a way of trying to one-up the other theatergoers, with many of these lines being repeated verbatim to this day.
There was a man who sat in the first row of the balcony, and when the criminologist says,
I would like to take you on a strange journey.
He screamed out, how strange was it? People laughed, and I would go home and think of lines that we could shout at the screen the next week.
Eventually, people started showing up in costumes, shadowing their performances on screen, and even bringing props like newspapers or rice to use alongside the film. These traditions became the standardized Rocky experience that spread the world over, with costume contests, shadow casts, audience participation, props, and callbacks dominating the midnight screenings that, by 1979, had been playing twice a week in over 200 theaters across the globe.
Never has there been a cult movie like this one.
I've seen Rocky Horror almost 400 times, and tonight's my 350th time.
302 times?
267 times.
My name is Sal Piro, and I'm president of the National Rocky Horror Picture Show fan club. Tonight's going to be my 425th time seeing this film. You know, the Rocky Horror Picture Show has been a midnight phenomenon in this country for almost 4 years now. 4 years running at midnight, and it started right here in the village, right here in Greenwich Village.
You have people coming in caravans and buses from all over the country. How much longer do you think this can go on in midnight movies throughout the country? Some people are saying that it's kind of losing its oomph, that people aren't throwing the rice with the same degree of enthusiasm.
Well, you've got to realise that I live in England and I don't really see a great deal of this activity. But Sal Piro, who follows it very closely, says ask me in another 20 years and I'll give you the answer.
It's truly an honor to be here today. 39 and a half years ago when I went to see the movie for the first time, and there was something there, and you are all proof. This cast standing behind me, all of you people in interest, all you people who dress up, all you people who love the movie, you are proving why we are here 40 years later. Thank you.
The film celebrated its 40th anniversary in 2015 and still shows no signs of stopping anytime soon, which has earned it the noteworthy achievement of being the longest-running theatrical release in cinematic history, which says a lot about the devotion of its audience. It's widely attributed to be the first movie known for its audience participation, and is considered by many to be the most significant midnight movie of all time, if not the first. And for a movie shot for about $1 million that was nearly canned after its initial box office disappointment, to go on to become this massive cultural phenomenon is no small feat. But it speaks to what the film represents and who the film appeals to and why. This was a time before social media or the internet. Before it was released on VHS or DVD, the only way to stumble onto the film was through word of mouth or pure chance. To get the details of the costumes and the makeup just right, you couldn't pause and study an individual frame. To learn all of the lyrics, you couldn't just play the songs on repeat. You had to go see the movie time and time again. And for many, it became a weekly ritual where you felt like you were a part of something bigger than yourself, in a shared space with like-minded people, which at the time wasn't easy to come by. When you consider the cultural landscape of the time where well-known LGBTQ spaces were frequently raided by police, where members of the gay community were harassed or assaulted, where you could lose your job or your housing if your sexual identity became known, where nerds and geeks were frequently bullied and tormented for liking anything that wasn't considered to be the cultural norm. It's hard to imagine something like this now that we're living in a world that's much more tolerant of these things, but back then it was a time when anyone who was deemed to be different was regulated to the fringes of society, taught to conform or to get out. But Rocky Horror gave them all a communal space to be themselves and to find acceptance. It offered something for the self-identified freaks and the geeks and the weirdos with a shared love of horror, sci-fi, musical theater, drag, and all things camp. It gave the marginalized groups of society a space to explore their identity, free from judgment or persecution, before those spaces were commonplace. It was a place for people of all walks of life to coexist, whether gay or straight or trans or cis, to let loose and have a good time. And in the years since its release, it's become so much more than just a film. It's become a cultural movement that embraces sensuality and androgyny and freedom of expression. It's often seen as a rite of passage for teenagers who may be questioning their own sexuality, and gives them an opportunity to see something different than what they've been taught. The film itself acts as a parable, or a modern fairy tale, where Brad and Janet represent the template for the contemporary conservative American couple who are taken on an alien odyssey of indulging in the sins of the flesh.
Come on, Brad, admit it. You liked it, didn't you? There's no crime in giving yourself over to pleasure.
The Rocky Horror Picture Show gave us permission to be different and taught us a valuable lesson about embracing your individuality.
Don't dream it. Be it. Don't dream it. Be it. Don't dream.
Thank you to Privacy for sponsoring this video. With all of the online shopping we do these days, it's hard to keep track of all of the different websites and vendors and free trial subscriptions and so on. Not to mention that you don't always know what these websites are going to do with your personal information or your account, where monthly membership fees can change unexpectedly or your account can be upgraded without your approval. Privacy allows you to create separate virtual credit cards to help protect you when shopping online. It keeps your information secure and condenses all of your different vendors into one convenient place, where you can set monthly spending limits so that you never spend more than you intend to. Making a new card is as easy as a few clicks, and best of all, the service is completely free to use. Viewers of this video can even get a free $5 credit when signing up at privacy.com/filmradar. If you're like me and consistently try out free services only to forget to cancel before the trial period ends, or you end up spending too much money on food delivery services, Privacy can help you take control of your online spending. Again, the link is privacy.com/filmradar to try it out for yourself, and you'll also get a free $5 credit when signing up.